Men often ask, how do I make her regret disrespecting me? The truth is, regret doesn't come from arguments. It doesn't come from begging, and it definitely doesn't come from trying to prove yourself. Regret comes when you become unshakable, untouchable, and completely indifferent to the games. Women regret disrespecting men who don't react emotionally, but instead make subtle moves that speak louder than words. These are the silent shifts that make her rethink everything about you. When a woman disrespects you, your natural instinct might be to defend yourself, to prove your worth, or to confront her directly. But here's the truth that most men never realize. The strongest and most effective response is silence backed by disappearance. Disappearing is not about immaturity or playing games. It's about reclaiming your dignity and demonstrating through action that you are not a man who tolerates disrespect. See, when you argue back or try to force her to recognize your value, you're still giving her your energy. You're still present in her world. You're still feeding the fire of her ego by showing her that her words or actions have power over you. But when you disappear, when you vanish without warning, you send a message that cuts deeper than any words ever could. You are not desperate, you are not waiting, and you are not available for disrespect. The human mind always craves what it cannot have, and this psychology works with brutal precision when you disappear. At first, she might laugh, she might shrug her shoulders and think she has the upper hand. But as time passes, the absence of your presence begins to echo louder. Suddenly, the silence becomes haunting. She remembers the moments when you were available, when you were giving, when you were pouring into her life. And now all of that is gone. No explanations, no emotional breakdowns, no desperate attempts to fix things, just a man who decided to walk away quietly. That silence makes her confront her actions in a way your words never could. Because when you speak, she can argue back, she can twist your words, she can dismiss your pain. But when you go silent and remove yourself, there's nothing to fight against. She's left alone with her thoughts, and those thoughts can become her greatest punishment. Disappearing also forces her to see you from a new perspective. When you're constantly present, constantly available, she may begin to take you for granted. Familiarity breeds a false sense of superiority in her mind. She believes you'll always be there no matter how she treats you. But when you vanish, you shatter that illusion. You create scarcity, and scarcity creates value. Now she's forced to view you as someone she cannot easily reach, someone whose attention is no longer a guarantee. That shift in dynamic can be deeply unsettling for a woman because it suddenly strips away the control she thought she had over you. The regret begins to set in not just because you're gone, but because she realizes she may have permanently lost access to someone who once cared deeply for her. Think about it. People only realize the value of water when the well runs dry. Your presence was the well, and as long as you were pouring endlessly, she never questioned its worth. The moment you close the tap and remove your presence, that thirst sets in. It might not happen immediately, but it always happens. And when it does, she won't be able to forget the fact that you chose to disappear instead of begging for her respect. That decision alone elevates your worth in her eyes because it proves you're not a man who tolerates being diminished. The power of disappearing is also about protecting your energy. By walking away, you reclaim the time and space to focus on yourself instead of wasting it on someone who doesn't value you. This self-preservation is not just powerful, it's attractive. When she notices that you didn't just disappear to sulk, but use that time to grow stronger, to improve your life, and to move forward with unshakable calm, the regret multiplies. Now she's not just haunted by your absence, she's haunted by the realization that your life is thriving without her. That contrast between her expectation of you breaking down and the reality of you rising up is what makes disappearing such a devastating silent move. One of the most underestimated yet devastatingly powerful silent moves you can ever make after being disrespected is to level up quietly. Most men make the mistake of trying to show their progress to the woman who disrespected them. They post excessively on social media, they exaggerate their wins, and they try to prove that they are doing better without her. But here's the truth. The moment you try to prove it, you're already showing that you care what she thinks. Real power comes when you grow, when you improve, and when you elevate your life, not for her, not for anyone else, but purely for yourself. The strength of leveling up quietly lies in its subtlety. You don't need to announce your progress. You let your transformation speak for itself, and eventually it cannot be ignored. A woman expects that her disrespect will weaken you. She expects that you will break down, chase her, lose focus, and sink into bitterness. That's the narrative her ego thrives on. But when you do the exact opposite, when you start hitting the gym consistently, when you sharpen your mind with knowledge, when you build your financial foundation stronger than ever, and when you simply become a more disciplined version of yourself without saying a word about it, it sends a shockwave through her perception of you. Because now, instead of validating her disrespect, you invalidate it with undeniable progress. That progress is the silent revenge, the kind that doesn't scream but cuts the deepest. Imagine this. She disrespected you, thinking you were weak, thinking you couldn't survive without her, thinking you would crumble. But months later, she sees a version of you that looks stronger, sharper, more confident, and more focused than ever. She sees other people noticing you, admiring you, respecting you, and even being drawn to you. And the most powerful part, you never said a word to her. You never bragged, never begged her to notice, never even looked her way. That silence combined with undeniable growth is what makes regret consume her. Because deep down, she knows her disrespect was supposed to break you, but instead, it built you. Leveling up quietly also changes the way you view yourself. It's not just about making her regret, it's about you stepping into your true potential. Every time you hit a new goal, whether it's improving your fitness, mastering a new skill, increasing your income, or building stronger emotional control, you reinforce within yourself that her disrespect has no power over you. This inner transformation radiates outward. Confidence is not something you fake. It's something that naturally grows when you know you've been putting in the work. And this authentic confidence is magnetic. She will notice it even if you never speak a word to her again, because energy cannot be hidden. Another key aspect of leveling up quietly is that it makes you unpredictable. She expected you to be predictable, to chase, to complain, to crumble, but instead you disappeared into your own growth. That unpredictability makes her curious. It gnaws at her. She starts wondering what you're doing, who you're becoming, and who's noticing you now. And because you never make your progress about her, she feels left out of a story she once thought she controlled. That exclusion, that sense of being cut off from the access she once had, creates an emotional gap that often turns into deep regret. What makes this move so powerful is its authenticity. You're not faking success to get her attention. You're genuinely becoming the man you were supposed to be all along. You're leveling up because you refuse to let her disrespect define you. And when she eventually sees the new you, whether directly or indirectly, it doesn't look like an act of revenge. It looks like you simply outgrew her. That's what stings the most, because now she realizes the very man she disrespected is living the life she secretly wishes she was still a part of, and that realization cuts deeper than any words you could have thrown at her. There is nothing more powerful than learning how to control where your energy goes. When a woman disrespects you, she is not just testing your patience, she is testing your boundaries. Most men waste their energy by reacting emotionally, trying to prove themselves, or engaging in endless arguments that only drain them further. But a man who masters the art of selective energy does something far more powerful. He simply withdraws it from the wrong places and redirects it into himself and into areas that actually produce growth. This silent move doesn't need an announcement, it doesn't need confrontation, and it doesn't need explanation. It simply shows through your actions that your energy is too valuable to be wasted on someone who does not respect it. When you stop pouring your attention into her drama, her disrespect, or her manipulative tactics, she feels the shift immediately. Women thrive on attention, whether it's positive or negative. Even when you argue with her, even when you show anger, you are still feeding her ego because she knows she still has emotional control over you. But when you withdraw that energy altogether, when you no longer respond, when you no longer show any signs of being triggered, she begins to feel an emptiness she cannot explain. That silence is deafening because it communicates something far more powerful than words. It tells her she is no longer the center of your world. That realization alone is enough to plant the seed of regret in her mind. Selective energy is about training yourself to see attention as a currency. Just like you wouldn't waste money on things that have no return, you should not waste your energy on people who bring you no value. When she sees that you have stopped investing in her disrespect and instead started investing in yourself, in your work, in your body, in your growth, it sends a message that you are a man of standards. You are not starving for attention. You are feeding your own empire. And that makes her realize she no longer has access to the power she once had. That subtle but undeniable shift in dynamics forces her to confront her own behavior and regret the disrespect she showed you. Think about how powerful it is when you walk into a room and your energy is calm, collected, and unbothered. You don't argue, you don't defend yourself, you don't try to win her approval, you simply direct your energy where it matters. That kind of composure radiates strength. A man who can control his energy is a man who controls himself, and a man who controls himself is impossible to manipulate. Women regret disrespecting men who operate from that place of control because it makes them realize that their games hold no power over him. Emotional detachment combined with selective energy is what makes a man untouchable. Another reason why selective energy is so effective is because it creates contrast. She disrespected you expecting a certain reaction. Maybe she expected you to chase harder. Maybe she expected you to argue. Maybe she expected you to fight for her attention. But instead, you gave her nothing. That nothingness, that void, is more haunting than any emotional outburst could ever be. People only appreciate energy when it's gone, and when she realizes you no longer give her the emotional fuel she once thrived on, it unsettles her deeply. That unsettling feeling quickly turns into curiosity, and curiosity eventually turns into regret. But beyond how it affects her, selective energy transforms you as a man. When you stop wasting your mental, emotional, and physical energy on someone who disrespected you, you suddenly have a surplus of power to redirect. That energy can now go into your body, your career, your goals, your passions, your dreams. And when you start making progress in these areas, the energy you once wasted becomes the very fuel that elevates you. She will notice this evolution, whether directly or indirectly, and it will burn her from the inside, because she will realize the respect she refused to give you is now being given by the world, and she played herself by letting it slip away. There is a silent language that speaks louder than anything you could ever say, and that language is social proof. Social proof is the evidence of your value that comes not from your own words, but from the way the world responds to you. When a woman disrespects you, she is betting on the belief that she holds the power, that she can lower your worth in her mind and still expect you to orbit around her. But when the world starts to recognize your value, when others admire you, respect you, and gravitate toward you, it sends a message that she cannot escape. You are not just valuable, you are desirable, and she was foolish to overlook it. The beauty of social proof is that it doesn't require you to boast or explain anything. It's not about trying to convince her. It's about living in such a way that your lifestyle, your relationships, and your reputation speak volumes on your behalf. When you surround yourself with people who respect you, when you walk into spaces where your presence commands attention, when other women smile at you, laugh at your jokes, or simply enjoy being around you, it creates a mirror for her. That mirror forces her to compare herself with the respect and admiration you receive elsewhere. She cannot ignore it because it is undeniable proof that her disrespectful perception of you was wrong. And here's the catch. You didn't even have to point it out. She sees it, she feels it, and the more she witnesses it, the more that regret grows silently in her heart. Social proof without words is far more painful than anything you could ever say to her face because it removes her power to argue or deny. This happens because human beings are wired to look to others for validation. We instinctively value what others value, and when a woman sees that you are respected, admired, and desired by other people, she subconsciously reevaluates you. She may never admit it openly, but inside, she begins to feel a sting of loss, because she realizes that the man she once disrespected is seen as high value by the very world around her. She realizes that what she dismissed is something others are cherishing. That realization cuts deep because it forces her to confront the fact that she miscalculated your worth. Social proof doesn't just come from women showing you interest. It comes from every aspect of your life. Maybe it's the recognition you get at work when your hard work pays off. Maybe it's your friends respecting you because of your consistency and loyalty. Maybe it's the way strangers are drawn to your charisma when you walk into a room with confidence. Every piece of external validation, no matter how subtle, creates an undeniable story about who you are. And when she sees that story unfolding without you saying a single word, it begins to haunt her. She can no longer comfort herself with the lie that you were not valuable. The evidence is everywhere, and it's impossible to ignore. What makes this silent move so effective is that it doesn't look forced. You're not trying to show her anything. You're not posting pictures to make her jealous or exaggerating your life to prove a point. You are simply living authentically, building a life that naturally attracts admiration and respect. And that authenticity makes it hit harder, because when she sees the world responding to you in a positive way, she knows deep down that you didn't do it for her. You did it because that's who you are becoming. That's when regret cuts the deepest, because she realizes she's now just an outsider looking in on a man who is admired by everyone else. Another reason social proof works so powerfully is because it creates competition. When she notices other women paying attention to you, it awakens something in her that she may not even want to admit. Even if she doesn't want you back, she feels the sting of jealousy because suddenly she realizes she is replaceable, and nothing bruises a woman's ego more than the realization that the man she disrespected can be loved, valued, and desired by someone else. The very attention she thought was hers to play with is now being appreciated by another, and that silent truth eats away at her pride. Ultimately, social proof without words is not just about making her regret. It's about building a reputation and presence so strong that you no longer need to explain yourself to anyone. Your value is reflected in the way others respond to you, and that reflection is louder than any argument. She may try to dismiss your words, she may try to twist your intentions, but she cannot fight the reality of how the world treats you. And when she sees that respect coming from every direction but her, it forces her to face the fact that she disrespected a man who was always valuable, always worthy, and now undeniably beyond her reach. One of the most powerful silent moves you can make after being disrespected is mastering your emotional control. Disrespect is designed to provoke you. It is meant to trigger anger, insecurity, jealousy, or frustration. Most men fall right into this trap. They lash out, they argue, they try to prove their worth, or they beg for recognition. All of these reactions only give the woman more power because it shows her she can control your emotional state. But the man who refuses to be shaken, the man who remains calm, composed, and unbothered in the face of disrespect, communicates something far greater than words ever could. He shows that his emotions are not for sale, not for manipulation, and not for anyone to play with. This type of control is rare, and it is deeply intimidating. When you maintain emotional control, you send a silent message. You cannot be provoked into weakness. Women often test men to see if they can rattle their confidence, because a man who is easily triggered is a man who can be easily controlled. But when you remain steady, when you don't let disrespect pull you into chaos, you rise above the game completely. That calmness becomes haunting because instead of reacting with predictable anger or sadness, you offer nothing. That nothingness forces her to deal with her own actions because she no longer has your emotional energy to feed on. In silence and calmness, you take back all the power. Think about how powerful it feels to be around someone who cannot be shaken. They walk into a room and no matter what storm is happening around them, they are steady, grounded, and in control. That energy commands respect without them having to demand it. Emotional control works in the exact same way in relationships. When you no longer rise to her disrespect, when you no longer waste your breath trying to explain yourself, when you simply respond with calm detachment, she begins to question herself. She begins to wonder why her actions no longer have the effect they used to. And that confusion slowly turns into regret because she realizes she lost her power over you. Emotional control also protects your masculinity. Too often, men give away their strength by reacting impulsively, but true strength is shown in restraint. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about channeling them into something productive instead of wasting them in meaningless battles. A man who channels his frustration into his goals, his gym sessions, his career, or his discipline is a man who transforms disrespect into fuel. And the beauty of this transformation is that it's visible. She will see the difference. She will notice that you no longer react. And that change will disturb her because it shows her you've grown beyond her ability to manipulate you. What makes emotional control such a devastating silent move is how it flips the dynamic. When she disrespected you, she expected an emotional reaction. She expected yelling, begging, chasing, or proving. But when she got calmness, when she got silence, when she got indifference, the script completely flipped. Now, instead of you being the one chasing validation, she is the one questioning herself. She starts replaying the moment in her head, wondering why you didn't react, why you didn't fight, why you didn't give her the emotional drama she was expecting. And those unanswered questions become the very foundation of her regret. The other side of emotional control is how attractive it makes you to others. Women are naturally drawn to men who are in control of themselves because it represents stability, strength, and leadership. A man who cannot control his emotions cannot control his life, but a man who is steady under pressure shows that he can handle challenges, he can handle conflict, and he can handle himself. That kind of presence doesn't just make the woman who disrespected you regret her actions, it makes others admire and desire you even more. Without ever saying a word, you elevate yourself in value. Emotional control is not about being cold or robotic. It's about mastering the discipline of not letting external chaos dictate your internal state. When you operate from this place, disrespect loses its power over you. Instead of lowering yourself to her level, you maintain your ground, and that quiet strength becomes unforgettable. The silence of your calmness is louder than any reaction you could ever give. And when she realizes that her disrespect no longer moves you, no longer touches you, no longer even matters to you, the weight of that realization presses down harder than any punishment you could have spoken out loud. There comes a point where the most powerful move a man can make is not walking away in anger, not leveling up to prove a point, not even showing calmness under pressure, but simply living by his own unapologetic standards. When a woman disrespects you, she's essentially testing how much of yourself you're willing to compromise just to keep her. Most men fail this test. They bend, they lower their expectations, they tolerate what they know deep down is wrong just because they fear losing her. But here's the truth. The moment you compromise your standards to keep someone who disrespects you, you teach them that you can be disrespected again. On the other hand, when you stand firm, when you refuse to lower your bar, and when you quietly but firmly remove your time, your energy, and your presence from anyone who crosses those lines, you communicate that you are a man who cannot be manipulated. That realization forces regret on her more than anything you could ever say. Unapologetic standards mean that you don't explain yourself over and over again. You don't plead for respect. You don't sit there trying to negotiate your value with someone who doesn't see it. Instead, you make it clear through your actions that you will not entertain behavior that diminishes you. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to lecture her. You don't need to write a list of demands. You simply live in a way that reflects what you will and will not allow. This is powerful because it removes her control over the situation. She can no longer play games with your emotions because the moment she crosses the line, you step back without hesitation. That quiet decisiveness shakes her world because it shows her you are not a man who settles. Women are naturally drawn to men with standards because standards reflect self-respect. A man who is willing to let go rather than tolerate disrespect is a man who values himself more than temporary attention. That type of man cannot be controlled with guilt, manipulation, or emotional games. And when she realizes that, when she sees you are willing to walk away instead of compromising your boundaries, it stings. Because now she has to face the painful truth that she was not important enough to make you betray your own principles. That burns deeper than any argument because it proves she was never in control. You were. Living with unapologetic standards also means you no longer seek validation outside yourself. You don't bend your rules for approval. You don't soften your edges to be liked. You don't cling to someone just because you fear being alone. Instead, you move with certainty. You know what you want, you know what you deserve, and you know what you will not tolerate. That kind of conviction is rare in today's world, and when a woman encounters it, she has no choice but to respect it, even if she doesn't admit it. And if she disrespected you in the past, that respect often returns in the form of regret. She realizes she lost a man who valued himself more than he valued her attention, and that realization lingers in her mind far longer than any temporary argument could. Another reason unapologetic standards are so powerful is because they make you untouchable. When you live by your own rules without guilt or hesitation, you stop being afraid of losing people. And ironically, this fearlessness makes others want to stay. Because deep down, people respect those who don't compromise their integrity. They may not always agree, they may not always like it in the moment, but they cannot deny the strength it takes to walk away from anything that does not align with your principles. That strength creates an aura of authority around you, and it silently forces others to treat you differently. A woman who once disrespected you will eventually regret it because she'll realize you are not a man who allows repeated chances. You give respect, but if it is not returned, you withdraw it permanently. Unapologetic standards are not about arrogance or cruelty. They are about self-preservation. They are about making sure your life is built on mutual respect, not tolerance of disrespect. They are about protecting your time, your energy, and your peace of mind from those who would drain it. And when you consistently live this way, people begin to see you differently. You no longer look like a man desperate for approval. You look like a man who already carries everything he needs within himself. That shift in perception is what turns disrespect into regret, because she realizes too late that she disrespected a man who will never lower himself for anyone, no matter how much he once cared. At the end of the day, the regret a woman feels doesn't come from your arguments, your begging, or your attempts to prove yourself. It comes from the silent moves you make that show her she miscalculated who she was dealing with. When you disappear instead of chasing, when you level up quietly instead of breaking down, when you control where your energy goes instead of wasting it, when the world itself validates your worth without you saying a word, when you master your emotions instead of letting them control you, and when you stand firm in your unapologetic standards, you become untouchable. These moves are not about revenge, they are about transformation. They are not about making her regret as your main goal, but about elevating yourself to the point where her regret becomes inevitable. Disrespect loses its power when you stop reacting and start rebuilding yourself into a man who doesn't just demand respect, he embodies it. And once you embody respect, once you become that man, you no longer need to teach anyone a lesson because your life itself becomes the lesson. When you operate this way, regret is no longer something you chase. It becomes the natural consequence of who you are. She will feel it in the silence. She will see it in your growth. She will sense it in the way others respond to you. And she will know it in the pit of her heart when she realizes she disrespected a man who could never be broken. And while she sits with that regret, you move forward, stronger, sharper, and more focused than ever, living proof that respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you command by the way you carry yourself.